The National Desk, America's News Now.
I am filled with the gratitude for the outpouring of support we've received from all across our great country. But the time has now come to suspend my campaign.
The inevitable happens, making Donald Trump the last Republican standing. Why President Biden is welcoming the news that Nikki Haley's run is over. Dangerous escalation. Houthi attacks in the Red Sea reach a new deadly threshold for the first time as maritime hostilities continue. Plus, red flags being raised about common acne creams, the alarming health concerns that could make you think twice about what you put on your face. This is the National Desk, America's News Now. I'm Amira David. The 2024 presidential general election is all but set with a rematch of what we saw just 4 years ago with GOP candidate Nikki Haley suspending her campaign this morning. There are now no opponents left to stop Donald Trump from clinching his third Republican nomination. Winning about 90% of all delegates awarded so far in this primary season, he will most certainly officially pass the needed 1,215 pledged delegates next Tuesday when 4 more states head to the polls. But this Trump victory could have its drawbacks as the Biden campaign looks to pick up new voters.
I think Nikki Haley's voters have made it very clear exactly who they are. So if you agreed with Nikki Haley when she stood up to Trump for things like election denialism or the chaos and division that he represents, there is, in fact, going to be a home for them in Joe Biden's campaign.
In her speech, Nikki Haley didn't endorse the former president, but analysts in South Carolina don't think she is ready to jump off the party bandwagon quite yet either. The National Desk's Lauren Lennon is in Charleston, South Carolina, with more.
Nikki Haley announcing the end of her presidential campaign nearly 13 months after it began, but not outright endorsing her former boss and the presumptive Republican nominee, Donald Trump.
Our country is too precious to let our differences divide us. I have always been a conservative Republican and always supported the Republican nominee. It is now up to Donald Trump to earn the votes of those in our party and beyond it who did not support him. And I hope he does that. At its best, politics is about bringing people into your cause, not turning them away. And our conservative cause badly needs more people.
Political expert Gibbs Knott says this doesn't necessarily mean the end to Haley's political career.
She's 52 years old, so she has a very bright future. She could run for U.S. Senate. She could make another run at the presidency. She's got a lot of time. Think about it, she's like 3 decades younger than Donald Trump and Joe Biden.
He says he wouldn't be surprised if she ended up on Trump's team.
They were at each other's throats, but will he pick her? Will he not pick her? I don't expect her to be the VP. I think there's probably too much, discord between Trump and Haley. But, I wouldn't fall out of my chair in surprise if she ended up played some role in the Trump administration.
New tonight, another partial shutdown averted. The U.S. House of Representatives passed a 6-bill funding package that will authorize part of the federal government through the end of the fiscal year on September 31st. This new legislation contains new appropriations bills as opposed to a continuing resolution. Speaker Mike Johnson addressed the strategy before the vote today.
We're forcing reforms, trying to force Congress back into the mode, the statutory mode, the lawful mode, in the way in which it's supposed to work with regard to government funding. That means 12 separate appropriations bills, not all lumped into one.
Today's bill has the Senate's backing and is expected to pass before a Friday deadline. The deadline after that is March 22nd, where another 6 appropriations bills will need to pass. If Congress is forced to lean on a continuing resolution, some federal programs will be hit with a mandatory 1% funding cut on April 1st. With this as a backdrop, President Joe Biden's State of the Union address tomorrow is expected to be as much about the state of our union as it is about the state of the 2024 presidential race, with top issues looming large and what we expect him to focus on. Here's national correspondent Christine Frizzell with a preview.
A prevailing goal for President Joe Biden will likely be instilling hope at a time his critics are working overtime to paint a different picture of life with him in the White House.
If you had to describe in one word what you believe the State of the Union is, you've heard the word crisis, you've heard catastrophe. I think maybe a summary is decline.
With polls showing immigration now the top issue for many voters, President Biden just visited the border and blamed Republicans for not passing legislation that could have helped.
It's time for the speakers and some of my Republican friends in Congress who are blocking this bill to show a little spine.
Republicans countering that message.
They want open borders, and open borders are going to destroy our country.
A recent NBC News poll laid out Biden's vulnerabilities, with Trump leading by 35 points on securing the border, 21 on crime, 22 on the economy, and 23 regarding mental and physical health. Age is one issue Biden seems to be talking about.
You got to take a look at the other guy. He's about as old as I am, but he can't remember his wife's name.
Yeah.
And,
On the economy, President Biden had hoped his message on Bidenomics would land, especially considering inflation is way down. Americans' wages are up, with an economy that's added 13 million jobs. Instead, this message from Republicans seems to be more pervasive.
It was Joe Biden's runaway spending that led to double-digit inflation, historic interest rates, and bank collapses.
Biden also expected to lean in on a consistently winning message, reproductive rights, reminding voters Trump was responsible for overturning Roe v. Wade.
How far will he go? When will he stop? You know the answer. He won't.
One other thing we'll be watching is to see how the president addresses Israel's war with Hamas, his support for Israel prompting hundreds of thousands of voters to vote uncommitted in several primary races. These are people who largely would not be voting for Donald Trump, but who have threatened to stay home in November. Amira?
And Christine, any hints from the White House today as to what else he might address tomorrow?
Yeah, we actually did get a little insight. The president will lay out how his IRS is aggressively going after millionaires who haven't paid their taxes. And that actually led to the collection of about $500 million, not to mention some big wins for small businesses and possibly an announcement about housing. The big thing tomorrow night will be drawing distinctions. And unlike in most previous elections, his opponent actually has a previous record in the White House to contrast.
All right, all eyes will be watching. Live from Washington, D.C., Christine Frizzell, thank you as always. For the first time, Houthi attacks on commercial shipping have killed individuals. 2 crew members on board a ship linked to Barbados died and 6 others injured following a missile attack this morning. Survivors were able to abandon the ship with the help of the U.S. and Indian navies. The State Department addressed the situation that seemed inevitable.
The Houthis have continued to launch these reckless attacks with no regard for the well-being of innocent civilians who are transiting through the Red Sea. And now they have unfortunately and tragically killed innocent civilians.
Today's attack comes one day after an attempted attack on a ship in the Red Sea. The U.S. military says a U.S. destroyer shot down Houthi drones and missiles. Houthi officials claim the attack was targeting 2 American warships in the region. They have carried out repeated attacks on ships in the Red Sea since November, angered over the ongoing war in Gaza. And tonight, still no breakthrough deal that would bring the war in Gaza to a halt temporarily. Hamas continued negotiations today to reach a 40-day ceasefire in Gaza, saying it has, quote, shown flexibility in talks, claiming Israel is evading obligations. Hamas wants a permanent pathway to a ceasefire. Israel has refused that as a possibility, calling Hamas's demands crazy. But hours on the clock are critical as we learn a hunger crisis grows more dire on the ground in war-wrecked Gaza. At least 20 babies have starved to death in northern Gaza. That's according to health authorities in the Hamas-run enclave. Health workers say thousands of babies run the risk of dying from starvation if Israel's current restrictions on food, fuel, and water entering the enclave persist. Israel maintains it is attempting to get more aid in. In recent days, the United States has moved to airdrop aid in the enclave and has stepped up pressure on Israeli officials to do more to limit the suffering of children and women there who are desperate for more. And tonight, a jury in place in the trial of James Crumbley, the father of the teen who killed 4 students in the deadliest school shooting in Michigan's history. Crumbley is charged with involuntary manslaughter. Prosecutors arguing he helped his son get the gun that was used in the crime and that he ignored really severe warning signs. His wife, Jennifer Crumbley, was convicted last month. Opening statements begin tomorrow. Ohio will soon start handing out millions of dollars in opioid settlement money to organizations across the state. The One Ohio Recovery Foundation is distributing more than $860 million of settlements with drug companies for their part in the opioid crisis. The money will go towards fighting the epidemic. The foundation says it'll release its request for proposals on Monday. Bag checks are coming to New York's transit system in an effort to decrease crime. New York Governor Kathy Hochul says roughly 750 New York National Guardsmen and 250 state and metro police will conduct regular bag checks at the city's busiest bus and train stations. In 2024, subway crime is already up 20% over the same time last year, according to the NYPD. The Supreme Court announced today that they will hear arguments in Donald Trump's presidential immunity case on April 25th. The court ruled 9-0 earlier this week in favor of Trump in his appeal against Colorado's state secretary, who removed him from the primary ballot over the 14th Amendment's insurrectionist clause. Coming up, a cancer-causing chemical has been found in several popular over-the-counter acne treatments. What you need to know about that. Then a Las Vegas airport is testing new self-screening technology, how it works and when it officially rolls out. And later, there's been a dramatic rise in solar panel scams, how they work and how to avoid falling victim. We'll be right back. Right now, more than 47 million Americans under flood alerts as a storm sweeps through the Northeast. People living along the I-95 corridor and east are at risk, with some areas forecast to get up to 5 inches of rain by tomorrow. And heavy rain and thunderstorms are forecast from central Texas through the southeast tomorrow through Saturday. Large hail and tornadoes possible in Texas and Oklahoma. Lastly, red flag warnings in place in parts of Minnesota, Iowa, Nebraska, South Dakota, Texas, and New Mexico due to a high risk of fire, strong wind, and low humidity fueling those conditions. Prosecutors in Maryland say they need more tools in their toolbox to go after the perpetrators of some of the biggest organized car theft rings in the state. Most carjackings there are committed by juveniles, but are directed by adults affiliated with gangs. And prosecutors say the law as it stands right now doesn't allow them to charge those adults instigating the crime to the fullest extent. Prosecutors are lobbying for a bill that would change that. The National Desk's Brad Bell explains.
As carjacking and auto theft numbers have soared over the last few years, prosecutors in the two most impacted jurisdictions, Baltimore City and Prince George's County, say they have seen trends. Much of the crime, they say, is being done by juveniles in groups, often at the direction of others.
Almost none of these crimes are done by one individual.
So what you're seeing is the adults are preying on the juveniles and have the juveniles there as well as part of the larger overall crew. Those individuals that are running around carjacking in groups 3, 4, 5 cars a night, and they ride around carjacking citizens, taking the cars then down to a chop shop.
And that, they say, is the definition of organized crime. And yet, State's Attorneys Ivan Bates of Baltimore and Aisha Braveboy of Prince George's say current law doesn't allow them to go after those who may be behind a carjacking but didn't actually hold the gun and do the crime. And so they're in Annapolis together lobbying for a bill which would expand definitions of organized crime to include, for instance, street gangs who steal cars and allow for tougher penalties for those involved.
We believe that this will provide a great deterrent for individuals who may choose to work in concert with others to wreak havoc throughout our state.
A similar bill failed in the legislature last year, but now Braveboy and Bates believe the senators and delegates have heard from enough constituents who want something done to protect their cars and themselves.
We think that perhaps the legislature will be maybe more open to it because now they understand that the prosecutors need more tools.
The labor market is still strong, according to an Oxford economics analyst looking at a new government report. Job openings dropped slightly from 8.89 million in December to 8.86 million in January. The number of people quitting their jobs fell to a 3-year low. That could mean slower wage growth is coming, which could bode well for the fight against inflation. And interest rates are expected to come down later this year, but not until the Fed gains more confidence that inflation is under control. That's what Fed Chair Jerome Powell told House lawmakers just today. He also sounded optimistic about the future of the economy.
I will say, so there's no evidence or no reason to think that the U.S. economy is in or in some kind of short-term risk of falling into recession. Having said that, though, there's always a possibility, a meaningful possibility that an economy will fall into recession. I don't think that possibility, though, is elevated at the current time.
Powell will appear before a Senate panel tomorrow. Over in the Senate, NTSB Chair Jennifer Homendy said Boeing is not cooperating with the National Transportation Safety Board's investigation into the Alaska Airlines door plug incident.
Boeing has not provided us with the documents and information that we have requested numerous times over the past few months. There is one team that deals with the doors of 25 people. Why we don't have those names today, 2 months later, is really disappointing.
Homendy says it's not uncommon for these requests to take time, and the documents they're asking for may not exist, which raises its own set of questions. You may recall when a door plug flew off an Alaska Airlines flight in mid-air on January 5th. Boeing has not responded to Homendy's testimony. Breaking right now, a jury has convicted the movie armorer of involuntary manslaughter in the deadly shooting of a cinematographer by Alec Baldwin. We are following that breaking news. We will continue to follow it and bring you the updates in that case. Tonight, the FDA is being asked to recall popular acne treatments you may have right on your bathroom counter right now. A U.S. lab says it has detected benzene, a chemical that causes cancer, in several over-the-counter acne products, including from brands like Clearasil, Proactive, La Roche-Posay, CeraVe, and Neutrogena. High levels of benzene were detected not only inside the products containing benzoyl peroxide, but also in the air around the products, meaning it can leak out and therefore also poses an inhalation risk. As of right now, the FDA has yet to respond, but we'll continue to follow the story and bring you the very latest. The first over-the-counter continuous glucose monitor for Americans with type 2 diabetes has been approved by the FDA. Roughly 35 million Americans have type 2 diabetes. When the body doesn't respond to sugar-regulating insulin, the monitor would replace the need for taking blood samples multiple times a day. The new over-the-counter device will be available in drugstores over the summer. Hunter Biden will get his chance to publicly testify before the House Oversight Committee on March 20th. Chairman James Comer announced the scheduled hearing today that will have Hunter sit beside former business partners Tony Bobulinski, Devin Archer, and Jason Galanis. This hearing will be part of the GOP's impeachment inquiry into Joe Biden as they try to tie the president to financial gains of his family while he was vice president. New self-screening technology is being tested at the Harry Reid International Airport in Las Vegas today. The TSA is experimenting with an autonomous process in the hope of making security checks faster and safer for travelers. A virtual assistant can answer questions while agents operate X-ray machines remotely under the new program. The process will be officially rolled out on March 11th at the airport, but the TSA has not said if or when they will be ready for the rest of the country. And Pope Francis continues to struggle with lingering health issues. He's had an aide read his catechism lesson for the past few days, and he could not get back onto his Pope-mobile today. He's been dealing with a cold, bouts of bronchitis, also a flu, along with a knee fracture. Francis went to the hospital a week ago for testing, but the results have not been shared as of yet. Coming up, there's been a nationwide push to get more students involved in STEM. How these efforts are working. We'll be back in 90 seconds. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering the issues that matter most to you. We're taking the pulse of America.
New research shows that even with decades of investment in STEM education, more still needs to be done to encourage kids to pursue STEM careers. Dan Correa is the CEO of the Federation of American Scientists. He says a far smaller percentage of Gen Z students actually plan to pursue a STEM job.
The headline, I think, is that students are getting classroom education in STEM and are interested, but we're not converting that into actual career plans and careers at nearly the same level.
Saving money with sunshine, a sales tactic Florida Attorney General Ashley Moody says many solar companies are using to scam Floridians.
Since 2019, our office has experienced an increase of over 700% in complaints regarding residential solar installation.
With the influx of people moving to Florida and buying homes and a booming solar industry, Moody says it's no surprise scammers are on the rise. During a press conference Tuesday, the Attorney General said not all solar energy companies are trying to steal from you. So how can you spot the difference between a good faith actor and a scammer?
Number one is to be knowledgeable, to be patient, and don't fall to a pressure sales tactic.
Tulare Lake in Kings County now looks more like a pond than a lake. Water covers only 2,600 acres. Last spring, when runoff from 5 rivers sent water streaming into Kings County, it took more than 120,000 acres out of production. Many predicted it would take years for the water to subside. Now, less than a year later, farming in the area is making a comeback.
And we've got tractors and trucks moving around, and fields are getting prepared to start growing crops again.
Well, take a look at this. A leading European cycling team hopes its futuristic design on a new cycling helmet will lead to a big improvement in time trial performance for its riders. But onlookers, well, they're a little distracted by this. After its debut earlier this week in Italy, these fashion-forward helmets, you might call them, garnered a mixed bag of reviews. Some people loving its cutting-edge look, others calling them ridiculous and even ugly. The helmet design is under review by cycling's global governing body. Needless to say, they'll be paying more attention to functionality and safety than they will be looks. But in case you're wondering, social media users are drawing comparisons to stormtroopers, aliens, and Star Wars. And I have to say, I do see the resemblance there. That does it for this edition of the National Desk. We invite you to join us again this evening for more coverage on America's top stories. Just check your local listings. I'm Amira David. Thank you so much for watching.